I was sitting in my bedroom with only the glow of a small lamp on the dresser when the first burst of laughter drifted in from the yard. It rolled across the fields like it belonged there, like it had every right to echo through the place my husband and I had built with our own hands. Music followed, loud and bright, with the kind of beat that rattles window panes. I sat very still, hands in my lap, listening to the celebration happening on the land that had been in my family for 3 generations. I had not been invited, not even informed. I picked up my phone for the 10th time in an hour, pretending I had something to check. But what I really wanted was for someone to text me that the whole thing was a misunderstanding. Instead, I saw a message from my neighbor, June. She had sent it 20 minutes earlier. Ellie, are you hosting something tonight? The ranch looks beautiful from the road. So many lights. My stomach twisted. I typed a quick reply telling her no, I was not hosting anything. Before she could answer, I opened the one thing I had been avoiding. The social feed everyone in town seemed glued to. Right at the top was a photo of my son Caleb and his wife Samantha. They stood under the archway at the ranch entrance, arms around each other, golden lights everywhere, a banner behind them that read, "Welcome home, Caleb." The caption under the picture read, "Our home, our family, our celebration." The words hit harder than they should have. Our home, as if the Grant Ranch was something they had earned or bought or tended, as if countless mornings of feeding animals in the freezing cold and patching fences in the dark and carrying on after my husband Harold died had nothing to do with it. I stared at their smiles for a long moment until I realized I was holding my breath. Another swell of laughter erupted outside. I heard clinking glasses. Someone shouted for the band to play something faster. I rose from the edge of my bed, walked to the window, and pushed aside the curtain. Strings of white lights hung from tree to tree. Trucks lined the long dirt driveway. Tents were set up in the field near the barn. A crowd of at least 50 people moved under the lights, drinks in hand, plates of food balanced on their palms. Not a single person had knocked on my door. Music swelled again, and then I heard something else. A few women standing near the porch, talking over the beat. Their voices carried clearly through the night. Sam says she is worried about her mother-in-law. Poor thing is getting forgetful, and tonight just was not the best time for her to join. Another voice answered, "I heard she has been seeing a doctor about her memory. It must be hard for Caleb." A tightness spread across my chest. Sam had said these things. She had said them enough times that strangers believed them without question. I pressed my hand to the window frame to steady myself. Forgetful, memory, doctor, words chosen carefully to paint a picture that was not true. I had never seen a memory doctor in my life. My phone buzzed again. June had replied, "I thought you would be out there with everyone. Strange to see a party without you." Strange was one word for it. I walked out of my bedroom, the old floorboards creaking under my slippers. As I moved down the hallway, I caught sight of the family photos lining the wall. Caleb at 5 holding a plastic cowboy hat. Harold fixing the old tractor behind him. Me standing between them, smiling like the world was whole. That version of my family had disappeared slowly over the years, carried away by distance and time. But tonight, for the first time, I felt something else taking it too, my place in it. The music dipped for a moment, long enough for the sound of Sam's voice to slip inside through the kitchen screen door. I paused at the bottom of the stairs. She was laughing, a clear practice laugh. Well, you know how older folks get. They cling to control even when it is better for everyone if they step back. Poor Ellie. We are trying to make things easier for her. A chorus of sympathetic followed, my own name spoken like I was a burden. I stepped into the kitchen, but no one saw me from outside. People milled around on the porch. A few looked through the screen door like they expected to see someone in an apron offering dessert. When they spotted only me, their eyes slid away politely. I noticed someone stacking empty serving trays on my counter. The kind of trays that came from a catering company, not from my pantry. I scanned the kitchen. They had brought their own food, their own decorations, their own people. The only thing that belonged to me out there was the ground under their feet. Caleb's voice chimed through the speakers then, amplified and cheerful. Thank you all for coming. It means the world to us. And a huge thanks to my wife for putting everything together. I do not know how she did it. He laughed. She takes care of everything these days. Everything, even the ranch. Maybe, even the story of the woman who owned it. I felt something settle inside me then. Not anger exactly, more like a slow, clear understanding. Sam was not just inconsiderate or excited or thoughtless. This was intention, a pattern. She was building a version of reality where I was no longer the center of my own life. My hand tightened around the cold edge of the counter. Another wave of applause came from the yard. Music swelled again. People started singing along. Someone shouted for more wine. I walked toward the back door. The night was warm for early summer, and the air smelled like roast meat. Perfumes I did not recognize, and the faint chemical scent of the rental lights. I slipped into the shadows near the shed. My feet moved without thinking, carrying me along the path Harold used to take when he was checking the generator before storms. The small building stood behind the laundry room at the edge of the service yard. A soft, mechanical hum filled the air. The generator, once installed so we never had to worry about outages, now fed every string of light and every speaker powering this party I had not been invited to. I stood there listening, the hum, the music, the distant laugh that sounded a little too sharp to be real. My husband had shown me every fuse, every switch. You should know how to run this, he had said. Never depend on anyone to keep this place alive. I had never forgotten that. I rested my hand on the main switch. The metal was warm. My palm was cold. For a moment, I let myself breathe. In, out, calm and steady, like Harold had taught me when I was overwhelmed. Then the breath left my chest in one long exhale, and I pulled the switch down. The hum died instantly. Music cut mid-note. The field fell dark. Voices rose in surprise, calling out for someone to check the lights, asking where the backup was. I stepped out of the generator room, the moon lighting my white cotton sleeves. People were stumbling through the dark toward the house or toward their cars. Someone shouted, "Who turned it off?" Another voice answered, "I think something is wrong with the ranch wiring." I kept walking until I reached the edge of the yard. "I want everyone off my property right now." The words filled the night. They came from a place inside me that had been quiet for too long. The kind of quiet that grows into something heavy. All movement stalled. Someone whispered, "Is that Caleb's mother?" Someone else said, "Nothing is funny anymore." I stood there, letting the silence stretch, letting every person on that lawn wonder why the woman who owned the ground beneath them had finally stepped out of the shadows. I did not know yet what I would uncover in the days ahead, only that tonight was the first time I had claimed my place in a long while, and the night was not finished with me yet. The moment held for a long beat after my voice faded into the dark, as if the whole ranch had stopped breathing. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, loud and steady, something I had not felt in years. People started moving again, slower this time, cautious, whispering to each other about what had just happened. Some backed toward their cars. Some looked for Caleb. Some looked at me like they were seeing me for the very first time. I stayed where I was until the last wave of applause and drunken chatter dissolved into uneasy silence. I did not say anything more. I did not need to. A single line had been drawn, and everyone sensed it. The ranch was mine, and for the first time tonight, no one else could pretend otherwise. As I stood there, letting the cool Montana air settle around me, a memory surfaced without warning. It came the way memories often do for women my age. Sudden, sharp, and full of color. My father had been a tall man, quiet but commanding. I was 12 when he stood with me at the edge of the northern pasture and showed me the landline for the first time. He said something that stayed with me long after he was gone. A home is not only where you sleep, Ellie. It is where your name roots itself. Do not let anyone pull it out of the ground. I had not thought of that moment in years. Back then, I did not understand how roots could feel like both comfort and weight. Now I understood all too well. More guests trickled through the yard, heading to their cars, turning on headlights to cut through the dark. A few murmured apologies they did not quite mean. Others acted confused as if they had no idea a 60-year-old woman might mind being erased from her own property. I caught the eye of a couple from church. They looked at me like they expected an explanation. I did not offer one. I simply walked toward the porch steps and let them move around me. People show their true hearts when the lights go out. I learned that tonight. A few minutes later, I saw Caleb pushing his way through the crowd, his face tight with embarrassment. He brushed past a few guests without apology and finally reached the open yard where I stood. "Mom," his voice cracked with irritation more than concern. "What are you doing? You scared everyone half to death." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized how far away he had drifted. The boy who used to run barefoot across this yard would never have spoken to me with that tone. That boy would have noticed the lights in my bedroom were off because he used to say he could feel when I was sad even before he saw my face. I did not answer him right away. People needed to leave Caleb. That was all I said. Before he could respond, Sam appeared beside him. Her dress shimmered with every step, catching what little moonlight remained. Even without bright lights, she looked perfectly composed. Her voice came out light and sweet on the surface, but too smooth to be sincere. "Ellie, goodness, you gave everyone quite a scare. Is everything all right? You could have just asked us to turn the music down." She said it gently enough, but the words slid underneath my skin like small cold needles. She was performing for the few lingering guests, placing herself in the role of the patient daughter-in-law, dealing with a fragile older woman. I saw it for exactly what it was. The last guest began pulling out of the driveway. Red dust rose behind their tires. I waited until the final set of headlights disappeared before I turned and headed for the house. I did not invite Caleb or Sam to follow, but they did anyway. Their steps echoed mine on the porch boards. Inside, the kitchen lights flicked on automatically from the backup battery. Sam blinked as if surprised the house still worked without her help. Caleb stood behind her with his hands on his hips, watching me like a man who was trying to solve a puzzle he did not want to understand. I filled a glass of water from the sink. My hands were steady. That surprised me. Usually conflict makes the blood race through my veins. Tonight I felt oddly calm, the kind of calm that settles in after too many storms. Caleb spoke again. "Mom, can we talk about this?" His voice had softened a bit. I did not turn around. "There's nothing to talk about, Caleb." Sam stepped closer. "Ellie, I know tonight must have felt overwhelming. All these people, all this energy. We should have checked in with you. It will not happen again." She said it in a way that made it sound like my reaction had been emotional rather than justified. She wanted to close the book right there, tie it up neatly with a bow, put the entire night into a drawer labeled "Old Woman Overreacts" and move on. I finally turned to face them both. "You brought more than 100 people onto my land without asking. You used my home for an event I was not invited to. You told people I am losing my memory. Neither of them spoke. Sam's lips pressed together just slightly. Caleb shifted his weight from one foot to the other. I took a slow sip of water and set the glass down. If the two of you cannot understand why that is a problem, then you have a much bigger issue than a blown generator. Caleb rubbed the back of his neck. Mom, we did not say anything about your memory. That must have been misunderstood. I caught a flicker of something on Sam's face. Not guilt exactly. More like irritation that the script she had planned was no longer going smoothly. I told them both I was going upstairs. I needed the night to end. As I began to climb the staircase, I felt their eyes on my back. Their whispers started before I reached the landing. Caleb saying, Mom has always been sensitive. Sam answering softly, that is why we need to handle things carefully. We have to make decisions for her benefit. For her benefit, as if I were a patient, a burden, a figure to be managed. In my bedroom, I closed the door gently and stood there listening to the faint movement of their voices below. They did not know I could hear them. They talked about the guests, the embarrassment. What would people think about the power going out? The tone was not concern for me. It was frustration that their image had been bruised. I sat down on the bed again. The same place I had been before the night erupted. The ranch was quiet now, the kind of quiet I used to love. But tonight the silence felt heavier, like something had shifted and could not easily be put back. Old memories found their way in again. The morning herald showed me the northern pasture, the first time Caleb learned to ride. The year my mother died, and the land was the only thing that made sense. All of it tangled together, reminding me that I had spent decades holding the roots of this place together. And now a woman who had been here barely 3 years was reshaping the story of my life without asking. I walked to the window and looked out at the field. The soft glow of a few leftover lanterns flickered weakly. White chairs were still scattered unevenly, forgotten in the rush to leave. The decorated arch Caleb and Sam had posed under leaned slightly, crooked and hollow now without the crowd. The night was thinning. Soon the sun would rise over the hills to the east. I stayed there at the window, watching the last lights fade. Something was already forming in my mind, a feeling, a direction. I could not name it yet, but it was there. I finally left the window and sat back on the bed, knowing sleep would not come, and also knowing the next day would bring more truth than I was ready for. Morning light crept across the ceiling before I finally gave up on sleep. My body felt heavy, but my mind was wide awake, too alert, too aware of everything that had shifted the night before. I got dressed slowly, choosing an old flannel shirt and jeans, clothes that reminded me of steadier years. By the time I stepped into the hallway, the house was silent. Caleb and Sam had slept in the guest room. Their door was closed. I moved quietly down the stairs, not wanting to see either of them yet. The kitchen smelled faintly of last night's catered dishes. Nothing like the scent of my own cooking. I opened the back door and walked outside, letting the crisp Montana air wash over me. The yard was still a mess. Folding chairs leaned sideways. Paper lanterns drooped from tree branches, and bits of confetti stuck to the damp grass. The sight of it made something settle lower in my chest. The ranch had always been a place of order. Maybe not perfect, but honest. Seeing it twisted into something staged and artificial just for pictures felt like a bruise spreading across my ribs. I started picking up cups, plates, napkins, anything left behind. I needed the motion. I needed to feel the ground under my boots. Caleb found me halfway through the cleanup. I heard his steps before I saw him, slow, hesitant. "Mom," he said softly. I did not answer. I bent to gather a stack of plastic wine glasses, dumped them into a trash bag. "Mom, can we talk?" I kept my eyes on the yard. About what, Caleb? He let out a breath. About last night. About how everything looked. I straightened and finally looked at him. He was 32 years old, but at that moment, he reminded me of the little boy who used to stare at me when he knew he had done something wrong but could not quite admit it. What exactly do you want to explain, Caleb? He shifted his weight. We should have checked with you before the party. I thought Sam had mentioned it. I thought you knew. You thought wrong. He rubbed his hands together the way he always did when he was trying to avoid saying the harder thing. Sam wanted it to be special. She said we needed to celebrate starting a new chapter, coming home for a while. She put so much work into it. And you believed her when she said I should not be there. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I went back to gathering the decorations. Caleb followed me. It is not that. Mom, it is just that sometimes you get stressed around crowds, and she thought it might be easier for you if you skipped this one. I stopped so suddenly he nearly ran into me. Who told her that? Caleb, who told her I get stressed around crowds. He looked confused for a second, then embarrassed. I guess I did, he said quietly. Years ago. You remember when I was in high school and you had that panic episode at the holiday fair? I stared at him. Caleb. That was almost 20 years ago, and it was from dehydration. The doctor told us that. Not a single moment since then have I had trouble being around people. He looked away. I know, but Sam thought it might help to give you space. She meant well. The words felt sticky, like sap that clung even when you tried wiping it away. Before I could respond, the guest room door opened and Sam stepped out onto the porch wearing one of Caleb's sweatshirts and a smile that was meant to look humble. Morning, Ellie. I wanted to check on you. Last night must have been overwhelming. I did not bother hiding the exhaustion in my voice. I am fine. Samantha. She walked closer, picking up a lantern and dusting it off like she wanted to show she was helping. Her tone stayed syrupy. I'm sorry if anything came across wrong. People were asking questions and I just tried to keep the peace. You know how folks talk. You mean when you told them I was forgetful? Or when you said I saw a doctor for memory issues? Her smile froze. I never said that exactly. People misunderstood. I said you had a lot on your mind lately and might be under stress. A cold breeze moved across the yard. Something inside me tightened. I picked up another armful of chairs while Sam chattered behind me about how beautiful the party had looked before the outage. She spoke as if last night was a minor inconvenience and not a deliberate erasure of the woman who owned the land she was standing on. As we worked, a thought kept circling in my mind. Something about how easily Sam lied, how confidently she shaped a story to her advantage. It was not new. I had seen glimpses of it before, small moments, subtle hints that she liked to control the narrative. 3 years ago, when Caleb first brought her home, Sam had walked through the house with too much interest in the wrong places. She would brush her fingers along the banister, run her eyes across the kitchen cabinets, study the backyard as if imagining something closer to a blueprint than a family home. Harold used to say some people do not look at a house, they look at a prize. I had not understood that fully until Sam. Later that morning, after Caleb and Sam drove into town for breakfast, I walked through the house alone. There were traces of last night everywhere, a vase out of place. My dining table pushed near the wall without being moved back, a few fingerprints on the side of an old photo frame. Small things, but each one felt like a signature written where it did not belong. I made my way to the living room and sat down in Harold's old leather chair. It still smelled faintly of cedar and tobacco. I closed my eyes and let the memories come. The afternoons when Caleb was small, and Harold would lift him onto that same chair to teach him how to whistle. The nights we spent falling asleep, listening to coyotes call out on the ridge. The years when this house felt full even during storms. A soft knock pulled me from the past. I opened my eyes and saw Marjorie standing at the open screen door. She had on her gardening hat and carried a paper bag full of warm muffins. I came as soon as June told me what happened. She said, "Are you all right?" I motioned her in, and she set the muffins on the counter. Her eyes scanned the kitchen as if she were taking inventory of all the things out of place. "You want to tell me what those two were thinking," she said. I sighed. I am not sure even they know, or maybe only one of them knows and the other is following along blindly. Marjorie lowered herself into a chair. She was one of the few people who had known me before I was a wife or a mother. She had never been afraid to tell me hard truths. "I told you that girl looks ambitious," she said, "not hardworking ambitious, opportunistic ambitious. There is a difference." I nodded. "I know. I just hoped Caleb would see it on his own." "Men do not always see what women see," she said, "especially sons who love too deeply and think everyone should be given the benefit of the doubt." I let out a small laugh. "Sounds like you are speaking from experience." She shrugged. "Life teaches you to recognize patterns, and that one has a pattern." I felt a sharp pull in my chest. I thought back to last night. The smile Sam gave Guess, the practiced tone, the quiet confidence that came from believing no one would challenge her. Marjorie leaned closer. "Ellie, you need to keep your eyes open. Some people treat kindness like weakness, and they take advantage of women who stand alone." Her words lingered in the air long after she left. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the barn, brushing down the horses, adjusting the tack, walking along the fence line. Work settles me in ways conversation cannot. It reminds me who I am. By evening, a sense of something sharper had taken shape inside me, a beginning. The knowledge that last night was not an accident. It was a step in a direction Sam had already marked out long before I noticed. As the sun dipped behind the ridge, I walked back toward the house. The porch light flicked on as I approached. Through the window, I saw Caleb sitting at the kitchen table alone, his shoulders hunched, his hands clasped in front of him. Sam was nowhere in sight. I stopped outside this door, letting the cool air steady me. There would be more conversations, more explanations, more truths waiting to surface. But tonight, I let the quiet fill the space between us, knowing it would not stay quiet for long. I stepped inside quietly, unsure if Caleb had heard me come up the porch steps. He did not look up right away. His elbows were on the table, fingers laced together, eyes fixed on some point in front of him that I could not see. The kitchen light painted him in a tired yellow glow. For a moment, I wondered if he was finally starting to question the version of events Sam kept feeding him. I pulled out a chair across from him and sat down. The wood creaked softly. He lifted his head. "Mom," he said, his voice low. "I feel like everything is coming apart at once." I studied him for a long moment before answering. "It is coming apart, Caleb. But things do not fall apart unless something has already been cracking for a while." He winced. Like my words stung a place he had been ignoring. "I do not know how last night got so out of hand," he said. "Sam said she talked to you. She swore she had mentioned the party. She did not once." He nodded slowly, but I could tell he still wanted to defend her. Old habits die hard. Before he could say anything more, the front door opened and shut. Sam's voice floated down the hallway. "Caleb, where did you go? You left me at the store with everything in the cart." He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the softness in his face was gone. He stood up, pressing his hands flat on the table. "Please do not start anything right now, Mom. I cannot handle another argument." I let him walk away, even though a dozen questions burned behind my tongue. When Sam's voice rose in the hallway, I did not move. They argued in hushed tones, the way couples do when they want to hide the fact that they are fighting, but do not quite know how to keep their voices down. I caught pieces. I said it was handled. "You promised you would not cause scenes. People were staring. If you had told me, Caleb snapped back, then silence, long and thick. I stayed at the table until their footsteps went upstairs. A few minutes later, a door closed sharply. The house fell quiet again. My breath felt heavy in my chest. Not painful, but weighted. Something in me recognized the shift happening inside my son. A door creaking open. A light flicking on. Small beginnings always start in silence. The following afternoon, the ranch had mostly returned to its ordinary rhythm. Spring sunlight spilled through the windows, warming the hardwood floors. I spent the morning checking the barn, feeding the horses, sweeping dust from the tack room. The work steadied me. I needed the steadiness. Later, when I came back toward the house, I heard voices from the front porch. I slowed my steps. A group of guests from the party had returned for their cars, which they had left overnight. 3 women stood near the railing, chatting while they waited for their husbands. They did not notice me at first. The older one in a denim jacket said, "Sam told us her mother-in-law is having memory lapses. I had no idea it was getting that bad." Another woman answered, "I know. She said Ellie gets overwhelmed easily, and that last night just pushed her too far." Poor thing, getting old is no joke. I froze mid-step. Heat pricked the back of my neck. Overwhelmed, lapses, getting old. Not a single word true, yet spoken so casually you would think they were discussing weather patterns. I stepped onto the porch deliberately so they would see me. Their conversations dropped like stones into water. "Afternoon," I said. They smiled politely, stiffly, the kind of smiles people use when they suddenly realize they might have been overheard. "We were just saying how lovely the party looked," the woman in denim said quickly. "It was such a special night for Caleb." I held her gaze long enough to watch her shift her weight nervously. Then I walked past them without another word and headed inside. Behind me, the porch conversations resumed, softer now, muffled by guilt or avoidance. I did not stay to hear the rest. I did not need to. The damage was done. Inside, I leaned against the kitchen counter and exhaled slowly. That was when it clicked. Sam had not been careless with her words. She had been planting seeds, quietly, patiently, in the ears of anyone who would listen. And people do not question stories about aging women. They repeat them. I opened the faucet and let cold water run over my wrists until the tension eased a little. Then I dried my hands and walked into the living room. My eyes landed on a photograph on the fireplace mantel. Me, Harold, and Caleb on the ranch entrance road the summer Caleb turned 6. All 3 of us smiling so big it almost hurt to look at. I touched the edge of the frame lightly. I had spent decades holding this place together, and now someone else was shaping the story of who I was in my own community. A woman who forgets, a woman who gets overwhelmed, a woman fading at the edges. The thought sat in me like a stone. Later that evening, while I was folding laundry in the mudroom, I heard the screen door open. Nate, my ranch hand, stepped in. He held a pair of gloves he had found near the pasture fence and gave me a nod. "I wanted to check on you after last night," he said. Folks seemed mighty confused. I kept folding. "I am fine. Nate." He hesitated before speaking again. "Miss Ellie, I heard something last night that did not sit right with me." I looked up. I was by the porch when Mrs. Adams asked where you were, and Mrs. Samantha said you were resting because you get disoriented with too many people. She also mentioned a doctor visiting you last week. A cold tightness wrapped around my ribs. "Thank you for telling me, Nate." He nodded again, concern flickering in his eyes. "If you ever need help talking to Caleb or anything around the ranch, you just ask." After he left, I set the laundry basket down and walked slowly into the dining room. The house was quiet again, too quiet. It gave shape to thoughts I had been trying to ignore for months. Sam was not simply inconsiderate or insensitive. She was strategic. She was cultivating a narrative where I could be pushed aside without resistance, a narrative where others would not blink if she stepped into my place. I went to the window and watched the sky darken over the ridge. A dusty purple stretched across the horizon, the color Harold used to call evening settling in. When I turned back to the kitchen, I saw something on the table I did not remember placing there. A small notebook with a pale green cover. It took me a second to recognize it. Sam's planner, the one she carried everywhere, marked with tabs and color-coded stickers. I walked toward it slowly, as if it might vanish if I moved too fast. It was lying open, not in the middle, at the very front. Inside were neat lists, schedules, reminders, design sketches. But what caught my breath was a page titled Long-Term Ranch Updates, and underneath it, carefully written, were lines that made my stomach drop. Kitchen renovation, exterior siding replacement, full landscaping redesign, transfer paperwork once signed, move primary bedroom to main house suite, transfer paperwork once signed. My fingertips went cold. There was no transfer planned, no discussion, no permission. I stared at that sentence until the words blurred. The edges of the page seemed to pulse with a quiet threat. Somewhere in the ranch yard, a horse whinnied, as if sensing the tension climbing through the air. I closed the planner slowly, pressing my palm over the cover until my heartbeat steadied enough to let go. The room felt different now. The air felt heavier, as if I was no longer standing in my own home, but at the edge of a story already being written without me. And I knew one thing with sudden clarity. Last night had not been the worst of it. It was only the beginning. I went still for a long moment, my hand resting on the closed planner, as if the thin cardboard under my palm could explain itself. It did not. Nothing in that book could soften the meaning of those few lines. I finally drew my hand back and let out a breath that felt too heavy for my chest. The house around me was quiet, but not a peaceful quiet. It was the kind that settles in after someone has broken something, even if the break is not yet visible. I walked into the living room, sat on the couch, and let the planner rest beside me. My eyes drifted toward the family portrait above the mantel, the three of us standing together on the ranch road. Back then, the world still felt like mine. Back then, I did not know how easily trust could be taken apart piece by piece. I closed my eyes and leaned back, letting the silence settle, but it did not last long. A sudden burst of laughter drifted in from outside, sharp and careless. I opened my eyes. Sam was out in the yard talking loudly on her phone, pacing near the barn. Even from inside the house, her voice carried enough to catch my attention. I pushed myself up and moved quietly to the window. That is what I said. She was telling someone. The sooner he understands, she should not be making decisions anymore. The sooner we can move forward. A short pause. No, she did not sign anything. Not yet. But she will. The words hit me like a bucket of cold water. I stepped back from the window. Something fierce rose in my chest. Not anger exactly, something older than that. A kind of warning bell. I reached for my coat and stepped outside. Gravel crunched under my boots. Sam was still talking, facing away from me. She should not even be living out here alone. It is not safe. And if Caleb wants a future, he needs to think long term. I stopped just a few feet behind her. She turned and jumped slightly, not expecting me. "Oh, Ellie," she said, her voice too bright. "I was just calling my mom." I did not bother pretending I believed her. I simply met her eyes. "You are very comfortable discussing my life with strangers." She blinked twice. I was not discussing anything personal, just expressing concern. Concern is not the same as rewriting the truth. Her smile slipped for a fraction of a second before returning. "Ellie, you have been under a lot of stress. Anyone would be concerned. Last night was hard on everyone." I did not respond. I simply walked past her toward the paddock. My horses stood near the fence, calm and steady, unaware of the tension hanging over the ranch. I leaned my arms on the top rail, staring out across the field. The mountains in the distance looked the same as they always had, but everything closer felt changed. I heard Sam approach behind me. She stopped a few feet away. I never meant to hurt you, Ellie. I kept my eyes on the horses. Intentions do not matter. Actions do. She stepped closer. I wish you would trust me. I turned toward her slowly. Trust is earned, and nothing you have done has earned it. Her expression tightened. For a brief second, the polite mask slipped completely. It was like watching a curtain fall and reveal something colder underneath. Before she could respond, the sound of a truck engine rumbled up the driveway. Both of us looked toward the house. Caleb stepped out of his old Silverado and shut the door with more force than necessary. His shoulders were tense. He spotted us and walked over. "We need to talk," he said, looking at both of us but not meeting either of our eyes. I waited. Sam folded her arms. "I talked to a few people in town today," he said carefully. "They told me some things that surprised me." His voice was tight, controlled. He looked at Sam. "They said you told them Mom sees a doctor for memory problems." Sam widened her eyes just enough to look innocent. "Caleb, that is not what I said. People twist words." Caleb continued. "And someone mentioned you told them Mom has trouble keeping track of things around the house." Sam pressed a hand to her chest. I was trying to protect her. People ask questions. I did not want them judging her. "You made them judge me anyway," I said quietly. Caleb turned to me, and for a moment his face softened. "Mom, I did not know any of this until today." I nodded once. I had no energy to soothe him. He looked at Sam again. "Why would you say things like that?" She shook her head quickly. "I thought it was best that people understood she needed support. You were worried about her too. You told me that." I watched the conflict ripple across Caleb's face. He had told her things. Old memories from when he was a teenager. Things that should not have been twisted into ammunition. Sam stepped closer to him. "Caleb, honey, we talked about starting a new phase in our lives. A future where we take on more responsibility. That means making sure your mom is safe and cared for." I felt the ground tilt beneath me. Safe and cared for. Words that sounded compassionate to anyone not paying attention. Words that also appeared in court filings when someone sought to remove a person's rights. I stared at her. "How long have you been planning this?" "Samantha." She blinked slowly. "I have not planned anything." Caleb looked between us. The tension in his expression grew. He ran a hand through his hair and took a long breath. "I need a minute," he said quietly. He walked toward the house, leaving me alone with Sam. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. A breeze moved across the pasture. Somewhere a horse snorted softly. Sam finally broke the silence. "You are making this harder than it has to be." I faced her. "That is because you underestimate me." She smiled then, not the friendly smile she wore around town, a thin, sharp smile. "I'm only trying to do what is best for Caleb." "No," I said, "you are trying to do what benefits you. And you think if you push hard enough, everyone will fall in line." Her smile faded. I turned to walk away. She called after me. "If you keep fighting this, you are going to make things worse." I did not answer. I went back toward the barn, needing space to breathe. Inside, the sweet smell of hay steadied me again. I ran a hand along the back of my oldest mare, Daisy. She lifted her head and pressed her nose to my shoulder the way she always did when she sensed my mood. I stayed there for a long time, letting her warmth settle around me. The sun had begun its slow descent behind the ridge by the time I stepped back outside. The light shifted to a deep amber, stretching long shadows across the ground. I walked toward the house, trying to gather myself. But halfway there, something stuck out from behind the trash bin near the porch. A corner of white paper fluttering in the breeze. I bent down and pulled it out. A catering invoice, paid in full, charged to Caleb's card. The amount made my breath catch. I turned the page over. Attached was a second receipt, a rental company, tables, audio equipment, lighting rig, again charged to Caleb. He could not afford any of this. A cold realization slid through me. Someone was bleeding him dry. I folded the papers with trembling fingers and headed toward the house. The sky had turned from amber to deep purple. The color that comes just before night makes its final claim. Tomorrow would bring another conversation and new truths, and maybe a crack in this story Sam had built so carefully. For now, I let the dark settle and felt the first sharp edge of resolve take shape inside me. I carried the folded invoices inside as if they were something fragile and dangerous at the same time. The house was dim, the last streaks of daylight stretching across the floorboards. I set the papers on the kitchen table, smoothed them with my palm, and stared at the numbers again. Charges Caleb could not afford, charges he did not authorize, charges someone had slipped under the surface of his life, the way roots creep through soil. Quiet until they split something open. I heard footsteps upstairs. A door closed, another opened. Soft voices, then silence again. I sat down at the table. My fingers drummed lightly against the wood. Part of me wanted to march up the stairs and confront both of them right then. But another part, a steadier part, stopped me. The truth had a way of revealing itself more clearly when you waited. I lifted the invoices once more and walked them to my bedroom. I placed them inside the drawer of my nightstand beside old letters Harold had written me long ago. Then I stepped back into the hallway and stood there a moment, letting the quiet settle around me. A house always feels different when trust has been broken inside it. The walls remember. The next morning arrived with a thin layer of frost on the fields. The air carried that early summer bite that comes just before the warm season truly settles in. I made myself coffee and drank half of it standing by the window, watching the sun spill over the ridge. After a while, I heard the sound of a truck pulling into the driveway. I stepped onto the porch just as Nate climbed out of his pickup. He held a small box in his hands. "Morning, Miss Ellie," he said. "Brought the parts you ordered for the fence gate." I nodded and walked toward him. "Thank you. You are up early." "Always," he said with a tired smile. "Cows do not give a darn about sleep." He handed me the box but hesitated before letting go. "You all right, Miss Ellie?" He asked it the way someone asks when they already know the answer. I looked toward the house. Caleb's truck was still parked near the barn. Sam's car, too. But neither of them had come outside. "I will be," I said, "just taking things one at a time." He nodded. "That is all any of us can do." He started toward the barn, carrying a coil of rope over his shoulder. I watched him go, grateful for his presence. The ranch felt steadier when he was around. Honest people have that effect. I went back inside and found the kitchen empty. A note sat on the counter in Caleb's handwriting. "Went into town with Sam, back later." The words felt thin, as if they had been written quickly. I folded the note and slipped it into my pocket, unsure why I kept it. The morning passed quietly. I fixed a hinge on the laundry room door. I swept the porch. I checked the fence line near the orchard. Every task filled the space that worry tried to take. But by early afternoon, a restlessness settled in my chest. I found myself walking to the house phone and calling Marjorie. She answered on the second ring. "Well, I was wondering when you would call." She said, "I heard from June that some talk has been going around about you, and it did not sit right with me." I sighed. "I'm afraid it is worse than talk. Margie," I told her everything. The whispers about my memory, the lines in the planner, the invoices paid with Caleb's card, every detail I had been trying to make sense of. When I finished, there was a long pause on her end of the line. "Ellie," she said slowly, "that girl is not just stirring trouble. She is laying groundwork. And if you do not move carefully, you are going to find yourself pushed out of your own life." I leaned against the counter and let the words settle. I know, but I do not know how deep all this goes yet. You will have to find out, she said. And I think you should start with someone who knows how these things play out, a lawyer. I had already been thinking the same thing. I told her I would handle it soon. After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen feeling the weight of a choice forming. There are moments in a woman's life when she recognizes a line has been crossed so completely there is no stepping back over it. I felt that line under my feet now. The screen door rattled suddenly, and I turned just as Caleb walked in. His expression was uneasy. Mom, we need to talk. I swallowed. All right. He set his keys on the counter and kept his eyes down. Sam said you confronted her yesterday. She thinks she upset you without meaning to. I let out a slow breath. Caleb, I know you care about her, but she is lying to you and about me. He shook his head. She showed me texts from people who asked about you. She said she was trying to protect your privacy. I stared at him, trying to find the boy I once knew inside the man standing before me. Caleb, she has been telling people I see a doctor for memory problems. You know that is not true. He hesitated. I know you have been more tired lately. That was when something inside me hardened. Tired was not the same thing as incapable, and he knew it. What else did she tell you? I asked. He looked at the floor. She thinks you are overwhelmed, that maybe the ranch is getting too hard for you to manage alone. I felt the sting of those words more deeply than I expected. My voice came out quieter than before. Do you believe her? He finally looked at me. Mom, I'm just trying to do what is best for everyone. Everyone. A word that somehow meant anyone but me. Before I could respond, the front door opened and Sam stepped inside. She carried a shopping bag in one hand and a bright smile that looked too forced. I found the cutest centerpiece ideas for the summer, she said, setting the bag on the table. Then she glanced between us. Oh, am I interrupting? Caleb rubbed his forehead. We were just talking. Sam walked closer to him, slipping her hand into his arm like a claim. I know this has been a stressful week, she said softly, but we have to think ahead, especially with everything coming up. I narrowed my eyes. Coming up? She froze for the slightest moment before smiling again. Just events, family things, plans. I heard the word echo inside me the same way transfer paperwork once signed had echoed in my mind the night before. I walked to the counter drawer, pulled it open, and took out the catering invoice and rental receipt. I handed them to Caleb. His brow furrowed as he read them. Sam, he said slowly, did you charge all this to my card? Her smile flickered. I thought you knew. We talked about the budget. We never talked about $6,000 for one night, he said, his voice sharp. She lifted her chin. You cannot throw a nice party without nice things. He stared at her. And what about the rental equipment, the lights, the speakers, another couple thousand there? Why did you not use your account? She hesitated, and the silence said more than words ever could. I watched the truth dawn on him the way clouds move across a sky, slow at first, then impossible to ignore. Before he could press further, a strong gust of wind rattled the porch windows. The sound made all of us pause. Sam took the opening to grab her bag. I'm going upstairs, she said. I do not want to have this conversation right now. Caleb stepped aside reluctantly, and she disappeared down the hallway. He stared at the invoices again. When he finally spoke, his voice was fragile in a way I had not heard since he was a child. Mom, I think something is not right. I wanted to reach for him. I wanted to tell him I knew. But instead I said the words I had been holding in. You need to look closely at the woman you married. He closed his eyes for a moment, then nodded once, as if acknowledging a truth he had spent months avoiding. We both went quiet then. A car engine started outside. I walked to the window just in time to see Sam backing her car down the driveway, her face set in a hard expression. Dust rose behind her tires as she disappeared onto the road. I did not know where she was going, but I knew one thing with certainty. She was not done, not by a long shot. Sam did not come back that night. Her absence settled over the house like a strange kind of fog, quiet but charged. Caleb paced the living room for nearly an hour before finally sitting down on the couch with his head in his hands. I watched him from the kitchen doorway, unsure if stepping closer would help or make things worse. By the time the sky turned dark, he stood up abruptly and said he was going to bed. I did not stop him. Some truths were beginning to press at the edges of his mind, and he needed space for them to take shape. I locked the doors, turned off the lights, and walked down the hallway toward my bedroom. Just as I reached my door, I heard the faint buzz of a phone vibrating on the console table near the front entrance. I went back and saw that Caleb had left his phone there. The screen lit up with a string of missed calls and unread messages. All from Sam. I did not open anything. I would not cross that line. But seeing her messages come in rapid bursts, one after another, reminded me that distance did not silence a determined person. It only sharpened whatever they were preparing next. I went to bed, but sleep refused to come. I drifted in and out of a light, restless doze until morning light crept across the floor. When I finally rose, I felt older than yesterday, but steadier too. Some truths become anchors, others become fuel. Last night had given me both. I found Caleb in the kitchen, staring at his coffee as if it held answers. He looked up, his eyes shadowed. "She stayed at her parents' house," he said. "Her mom texted me this morning. They want to talk to us later." The idea of a conversation with the Whitmore family made something sink inside me, but I kept my tone even. "What are they hoping to discuss?" He shrugged. "I do not know. Her mom said they have concerns." Concerns, another word that had been turned into a weapon lately. I poured myself coffee and sat down across from him. Before either of us could speak again, the doorbell rang. Caleb stood, but I reached the door first. When I opened it, a man I recognized from town held out a thick envelope. "Delivery for Eleanor Grant." I thanked him and closed the door before opening the envelope. My breath caught when I saw the header. A request for a cognitive and psychological evaluation, filed by Samantha Whitmore. My stomach clenched as I read the first few lines. The request claimed there were concerns about my ability to safely manage the ranch and recommended a medical assessment. It was not a court order yet, but it was step one. I handed the paper to Caleb without speaking. He read it slowly, the color draining from his face. "Mom, what is this?" "Exactly what it looks like," I said quietly. "She is moving forward." He sank into a chair. Why would she do this? Why would she go this far? The answer was already forming inside him. I saw it in his eyes. A dawning awareness, a cracking of old illusions. He leaned back, staring at the page like it might suddenly rearrange its words into something kinder. A car engine approached in the distance. I looked out the window and saw Sam's car turning into the driveway, her parents' car right behind her. Two vehicles, moving with purpose. Caleb muttered something under his breath and stood. The front door opened before he reached it. Sam walked in carrying a folder, her face calm in a way that looked practiced. Her parents followed, polite but stiff. "Good morning, Ellie," her mother said with a tight smile. "We wanted to clear the air and make sure everyone is on the same page." Sam moved toward Caleb, placing a hand on his arm. I did not want things to get messy. I only did what I thought was right. Caleb stepped away from her touch. "You filed a psychological evaluation request on my mother." Sam blinked once, then calmly nodded. "It is not an accusation. It is just a precaution. I am thinking of our future, Caleb, and your mother lives alone on a large property. It is irresponsible not to make sure she is stable." The words landed hard. I felt them like blows, not because of the lie itself, but because of how easily she believed she could mask cruelty as concern. Her father stepped forward. "Samantha told us there were incidents, signs of confusion, unsafe behaviors." I stared at him. I have lived on this ranch for more than 30 years. I raised a family here. I manage livestock, fences, machinery. There have been no incidents. He offered a patronizing smile. Sometimes we do not see our own decline. I felt my hands tighten at my sides. Caleb looked at his in-laws, then at Sam. His voice came out strained. Did you tell them Mom had medical issues? Sam hesitated. I told them things seemed off, that you were worried. I never said that, Caleb snapped. Her mother placed a gentle hand on Sam's shoulder. Sweetheart, let us handle this. She turned to me. Ellie, no one wants this to become a problem. If you cooperate, it will all be easy. Easy is an interesting word for the beginning of a takeover. I drew a slow breath. I am not agreeing to anything today. Her father frowned. You are making this difficult. I met his eyes. That is because you walked into my home and treated me like a patient instead of a person. For the first time, Sam's smile slipped, just slightly, but enough. Caleb stepped between us. This is too much. Mom is fine. She is not confused or unstable. Sam's voice sharpened. You are too close to see it. Something inside Caleb snapped. He set the evaluation request on the table with a sharp slap. No, I am starting to see everything too clearly. Silence followed, heavy and long. Sam tried again. Caleb, we talked about this, about responsibility, about taking care of things before they fall apart. He stared at her. Did you write that request yourself? She did not answer. She did not have to. Her parents straightened, offended. We should go, her mother said tightly. They left without another word. Sam paused in the doorway, looking back at Caleb with something cold in her eyes. You are making a mistake, she said. Then she was gone. The house was quiet again. But this time the silence vibrated with something new, awareness, fear, and in me, something sharper, resolve. Caleb sank into a chair. Mom, I do not understand how it got this far. I sat beside him. I think you do. You have been trying not to see it. He lowered his head. I never thought she would do something like this. I never thought she would try to go after you. I rested my hand over his, the way I used to when he was little. You are seeing the truth now. That is what matters. He exhaled shakily. What do we do? Before I could answer, a car approached again. This time it was Marjorie. She stepped out, holding a newspaper clipping and a printed screenshot. She hurried inside without waiting to be invited. Ellie, you need to see this right now. I stood, bracing myself, already knowing that whatever she held was about to pull back another layer of the truth Sam had tried so hard to bury. And I was no longer afraid to look. Marjorie pushed the papers into my hands before I could ask a single question. The first was a printed screenshot of a real estate listing for land just outside of Riverbend. The property description was nearly identical to mine. Same acreage, same features, same price range. Except it wasn't mine. It was Sam's parents' listing. The second was a newspaper clipping from the Riverbend Chronicle with a short column about a proposed development project on that land. A project tied to a company with a familiar name on its board. Whitmore Development Group. I felt the air tighten in my chest as I stared at the words. Caleb leaned in, his eyes darting fast over the print. Mom, this is her family. They are trying to sell the land, but they do not even own that property. It is under some kind of partnership agreement. Wait, why would they be trying to push a development through on our land? Marjorie pointed to a small line in the article. The project requires additional acreage from neighboring properties. Yours is the only neighboring property large enough to complete the development. If they get your land, the project goes through and their stake makes them a fortune. Everything clicked into place with a cold, painful snap. The psychological evaluation, the pressure, the whispers about cognitive decline, the manipulation of Caleb. It was not just personal. It was strategic. It was planned. I set the papers on the table, forcing myself to breathe. They need this ranch to finish the deal, and Sam was willing to take it from me to make that happen. Caleb sank into a chair, rubbing his forehead. I feel sick. Mom, she used me. She used us both. Marjorie crossed her arms, her voice firm but soft. She used your good heart, and she underestimated your mother. She always did. I nodded slowly. The truth was ugly, but it had weight. It clarified the air around us. It sharpened the edges of the fight ahead. Caleb picked up the screenshot again. Why would my wife be willing to destroy our family for this? Why didn't I see what she was doing? I touched his shoulder gently, because you wanted to believe she loved you, because you are a decent man. That is not a flaw. It is a strength that she turned into a weakness. His jaw tightened. I want to confront her. I want to ask her why. No, I shook my head. Not yet. Not until we know more. Not until we have every piece of proof we might need. This is bigger than emotional betrayal. This is a coordinated effort to take my land by force. They are not finished, and we cannot be careless. Marjorie nodded in agreement. I have a friend who works in county records. I can ask her to look into ownership transfers, pending zoning changes, anything. Ellie, they are not doing this alone. People with this kind of plan do not operate in the open. A cold certainty settled deep inside me. The Whitmores saw my ranch as a puzzle piece, something to acquire, not a home to respect. They did not care about the memories here or the work put into it. They cared about signatures and profit. Caleb stood restless. I should go talk to Dad's old attorney. He would know what to do, or at least where to start. I nodded, but I want you to be careful. Do not let Sam know we are looking into this. She will accelerate her plans if she senses us pulling away from her narrative. He gave a short, painful laugh. Narrative. That is exactly what it is. A story she wrote where you are the villain and she is the hero saving me from you. Marjorie gathered the documents. I will head to town now. My friend usually works the morning shift at county records. If she is willing, we should have more information by tonight. After she left, Caleb paced the living room. His anger had cooled into something heavier, something bruised. I watched him, remembering the boy who used to run through the fields with arms wide open, certain the world would catch him if he fell. Now he stood in my living room, a grown man, realizing he had been pushed instead of caught. He stopped pacing and looked at me. Mom, what happens if she pushes for the psychological evaluation again? What if the Whitmores file something more official? I answered honestly. Then we fight. We gather proof that I am capable, that I am stable. We get doctors to sign evaluations that reflect the truth. And we show that this is an attempt to seize property, not protect me. But we do not let them back us into a corner. That is when people make mistakes. And we cannot afford mistakes. Caleb nodded slowly. I will help. I will do whatever you need. I felt a steady warmth settle across my ribs. This was the first time since the wedding announcement that I did not feel alone in the house. That mattered more than I let him see. We spent the next few hours sorting through anything that could be relevant. Old property assessments, financial records, medical files. Not because we expected to need all of them, but because preparation was a form of protection. Near noon, Caleb stepped out to meet with the attorney. I stayed behind and walked out onto the porch. The winter wind was cold, but clean. It brushed across my face like an old friend reminding me I was still here, still strong. The ranch stretched out before me, quiet but alive. The fences, the pasture, the trees, everything I had tended for decades, everything I refused to lose. As I stood there, my phone rang inside. I walked back into the kitchen and answered. It was Marjorie. Her voice was low, urgent. Ellie, you need to sit down. I sat. Tell me. Her breath caught. The Whitmore development proposal was submitted 2 months ago, but there is more. They filed preliminary zoning documents identifying your ranch as the intended expansion parcel. They did it before Sam even married Caleb. A slow cold spread through my body. They planned this long before they entered our lives. That is not all, Marjorie said, her voice tightening. The partnership agreement on their original land only pays out if the full project is completed, which means if they cannot get your land, they lose everything. They stake their financial future on taking what belongs to you. I closed my eyes. So this was never about family, never about love. It was a business strategy disguised as marriage. Marjorie hesitated. There is one more thing. They listed potential obstacles in the report. I should not tell you this, but I think you need to know. Next to your name, they wrote one phrase, to be removed. My breath caught in my throat. Not harmed, not physically removed, but removed as a legal obstacle, discredited, undermined, pushed aside by any means necessary. I opened my eyes slowly, letting the cold settle into clarity. Thank you, Marjorie, truly. After we hung up, I stayed seated for a long time. The house around me was quiet, but no longer fragile. I had pieces now, proof, motive, timeline, every answer I needed except one. How far were they willing to go next? I stood and walked to the window, staring out at the land they wanted so badly, the land they believed they could take, the land they thought would come to them if they pushed me hard enough. Not this woman, not this land, not this time. I heard Caleb's truck pull into the driveway. He stepped inside, his face pale, his expression tight. "Mom," he said quietly, "we have another problem." I turned toward him, bracing myself. He held out a letter, a legal notice this time. They are filing an emergency petition. They want a temporary guardianship hearing. Everything in the room sharpened, like the air before a storm. So the next strike had already begun. I felt the weight of the words settle deep in my bones. A temporary guardianship hearing was not a warning. It was an attack. It meant the Whitmores were trying to convince a judge that I could not manage my own affairs. If they succeeded, even temporarily, they could use that ruling to force access to my land, my accounts, my decisions, everything I had built. I took the letter from Caleb's hands and read it slowly. The hearing was scheduled in less than 2 weeks. They were moving fast because they believed I would be too shaken or too disorganized to respond. They were counting on pressure to break me. Caleb pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. I talked to the attorney. He said we need medical evaluations and letters from people who know you. We also need to show a pattern of stability. He hesitated. "Mom, this is serious. They are going after your legal autonomy." I nodded. I understood exactly what they were doing. A guardianship petition was one of the few tools that could make an elder legally voiceless without ever laying a hand on them. It was a strategy used in financial abuse cases, and the Whitmores were bold enough to try. I folded the letter, set it on the table, and let my breath come back steadily. Then we start preparing today. We do every exam, every document, every testament. We gather witnesses. We record everything. Caleb looked at me with a mixture of relief and worry. I can bring statements from people at work. They know you are sharp and involved in everything. I can ask the vet who works with you, and Marjorie will absolutely testify. Good. And we get a second attorney, someone experienced with elder law, someone who has seen tactics like this before. He nodded and immediately started making calls. His anger had transformed into something quiet and determined, almost protective. It reminded me of my husband in a way I had not felt in years. I spent the rest of the morning gathering every document I could think of: property tax receipts, insurance policies, bills I paid on time, ranch management logs, veterinary schedules. I gathered them in neat stacks on the dining table until it looked like a small war room. Around noon, I called my doctor. She squeezed me in for a full evaluation that same afternoon. She had known me for 20 years and was furious when I told her what the Whitmores were trying to do. "When you come in," she said, "we will document everything. And Eleanor, you should know, cognitive decline is not something they can fabricate if you are healthy. These petitions do not succeed without evidence." I thanked her, then I thanked her again. Caleb walked through the kitchen doorway, holding his phone. "Mom, the elder law attorney can see us first thing tomorrow. She said she wants everything we have, including the development plans and the zoning documents. We will give her everything," I said, "every ugly inch of it." Before we left for the doctor, I went upstairs to grab my purse. On the way back down, something caught my eye. A car parked near the edge of the driveway. A familiar one, a silver sedan with tinted windows. Sam's mother's car. I watched it for a moment. It did not move. The engine was off, but someone was inside. I stepped out onto the porch. The wind carried the faint sound of a door unlocking. Then Sam stepped out from the passenger side. She took a few steps toward the porch before stopping in the middle of the gravel. "Eleanor," she said calmly, as if nothing had happened, "we need to talk." Caleb came out behind me. "What do you want, Sam?" She lifted her chin in that practiced way she had. "I heard about the hearing. I figured you would be upset. I came to tell you that if you cooperate, this does not have to be difficult." I stood at the top of the porch steps. Cooperate with what? Losing my rights, losing my home. Sam kept her smile thin. "We just want what is best for everyone. You are not getting any younger, and this ranch is a lot for one woman to handle. You could live comfortably. Relax. Let us manage things." I felt a chill crawl along the base of my spine. It was not just arrogance. It was calculation. Caleb stepped forward. "Sam, you need to leave. Right now." She ignored him. "Eleanor, you cannot win this. These hearings are quick. Judges lean toward safety. They play it cautious. If a family expresses concern, they listen." I stared at her. "And you think they will believe you?" She gave a small shrug. "I have already spoken with people in town. You would be surprised how many think you are overwhelmed here. How many believe you need help." I felt a slow burning rise through my chest. Not anger exactly. Something deeper and steadier. Clarity. "Sam," I said softly, "you may control the story around your own life, but you will not control mine." She blinked, thrown for a moment. I took one step down the porch. "I have been running this ranch longer than you have been alive. I have weathered floods, droughts, losses, and grief you cannot imagine. And I am still here because I am strong. You are mistaking quiet for weakness. That is the first mistake people make before they lose." Her expression shifted, a mix of contempt and uncertainty. Her mother honked the horn. Sam straightened. "I was trying to make this easier for you." I almost laughed. "Then go make something easy somewhere else." She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and walked back to the car. The sedan backed out of the driveway and disappeared down the road. Caleb let out a breath he had been holding. "She is seriously unwell. I cannot believe I married someone capable of this." "People show who they are when they want something badly enough," I said. "And Sam wants something, or thinks she does." We drove into town for my appointment. The doctor ran a full cognitive assessment, reflex tests, memory evaluations, and physical exams. When she finished, she shook her head with certainty. "Eleanor, you are healthier than most people 10 years younger. There is no judge on earth who could look at these results and say you are impaired." I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief, not yet, but hope, a kind that had teeth. On the way home, Caleb's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. It was Sam again. Dozens of messages, long paragraphs, some begging, some furious, some accusing. He lowered the phone. "I do not know who this person is anymore." I touched his arm. "You are learning. That is painful, but necessary." When we reached the ranch, The sun was low, casting long shadows across the fields. I stepped out of the truck and inhaled deeply. The air smelled like pine and cold earth. It reminded me of everything at stake, everything worth fighting for. Caleb walked around the truck to face me. Mom, whatever happens next, I am with you, completely. I am done pretending Sam will stop. I am done defending her. For the first time in a long while, I felt steadiness wrap around me like a blanket. I know, I said softly, and I am grateful for that. We headed toward the porch, but halfway up the steps, Caleb froze. Mom, I followed his gaze. There, taped to the front door, was another envelope, this one marked urgent. Caleb pulled the envelope from the door as if it might burn him. I watched his hands tremble slightly while he opened it. For a moment, he did not speak. Then he handed the paper to me with a tight jaw. It was a formal notice. The Whitmores had filed an emergency motion requesting immediate temporary control over my property until the guardianship hearing. They claimed I was at risk of causing physical harm to myself by living alone and managing livestock. They claimed I had shown erratic behavior and compromised judgment. They claimed I posed financial danger to my own estate. I read the accusations twice, slower each time. None of it reflected my life. It reflected theirs, or at least the fantasy they had crafted to justify a theft that began long before I ever knew their daughter existed. I folded the letter neatly and placed it on the table inside. Caleb hovered near me. Mom, we cannot let this go another day. The attorney said we need to file our own motion first thing tomorrow, and we need witnesses ready. We need everything organized. I nodded. We have it. And now we have proof they are escalating. Judges do not like being manipulated. They do not like aggressive petitioners. This will hurt them more than it helps. Still, I could see fear in his eyes. He did not say it, but I knew what he was thinking. They had gone farther than anyone sane would go. What if the next step was worse? I put a hand on his arm. They will not take this ranch. He swallowed hard. I believe you. I just hate that we are here at all. We spent the rest of the night gathering every supporting document into organized folders. Medical records, photos of the property, financial logs, notes from the veterinarian, statements from neighbors and my doctor, every detail of my daily life that proved clarity and stability. I worked calmly, steadily, as if preparing for a harvest. Caleb worked silently beside me. Grief and anger sat behind his eyes. But there was something else, too. Resolve. He had chosen where he stood. We barely slept. By dawn, we loaded everything into the truck and drove into town. The attorney, Miss Harper, met us in her office, already reviewing the documents Marjorie had delivered earlier. She handed me a cup of coffee and tapped the stack of papers on her desk. Ellie, this is a strong case. The Whitmores overreached. You can see it in every filing they made. Their claims are inconsistent with each other and unsupported by evidence. This will not end the way they think it will. I breathed a little easier. Then she added, but they are counting on you being afraid. Do not let them see fear in that courtroom. I nodded. Fear had faded days ago. What remained was something more durable. The hearing was scheduled for late morning. We arrived early. When we walked inside, I saw Sam and her parents near the front. Sam wore a pale lavender dress, soft makeup, and a fragile expression crafted for sympathy. She looked at me with polite concern, as if we were strangers meeting in line at a pharmacy. Her father nodded at Caleb with the mild confidence of a man certain the system was on his side. Her mother clutched a binder to her chest like she was carrying family heirlooms. Caleb exhaled slowly beside me. He kept his eyes forward. When the judge entered and the hearing began, the Whitmores took the floor first. Their attorney spoke in gentle, measured tones. He talked about compassion, about safety, about ensuring my well-being in my later years. He listed vague concerns, none tied to specific events. He described my land as burdensome, my work as excessive, my independence as a potential danger. He gestured toward Sam as if she were a devoted daughter-in-law, desperate to protect me. Sam dabbed her eyes at the perfect moment. It was a performance, choreographed down to the pauses. Then it was our turn. Ms. Harper stood, quiet, precise, unshakable. She placed medical evaluations on the table. Documentation from my doctor, clean and clear. She presented financial records showing consistency and stability. She presented statements from neighbors, ranch hands, a veterinarian, and people from town who had known me for years. She laid out proof of deception, including the development proposal and the zoning plans with my property, marked as necessary acreage. She introduced the partnership agreement that only paid out if my ranch became part of their project. The judge listened intently. Then Miss Harper asked to call one more witness, Caleb. He walked to the stand with shoulders squared and jaw firm. He did not look at his wife, not once. He spoke plainly. He talked about how I ran the ranch alone for years, how I kept meticulous records, how I handled emergencies calmly. He talked about my daily routines, my clear thinking, my independence. He described the first time Sam suggested I was slipping, and how he dismissed it, and how slowly her concern turned into pressure, then into control, then into demands. His voice shook when he said, "My mother is not confused. She is not unstable. She is not incapable of managing her life. I was manipulated into believing she needed help she did not need. I see that now. I'm ashamed of how long it took me." For the first time, Sam's expression cracked. Her eyes widened, her mouth parted, and her facade thinned until her true anger showed beneath it. The judge asked Sam if she wished to respond. She stood, her voice trembling. "Caleb, how can you do this? How can you say these things? I was trying to help your mother. You know how much pressure we have been under. You know she struggles here alone." Caleb stared at her evenly. "I know you never cared about the truth. You cared about the land." Her composure shattered. She raised her voice, talking too fast, saying too much. She insisted I was confused, though she had no examples. She insisted the ranch was unsafe, though she had never lived there. She insisted a guardianship would be temporary, though the filing suggested otherwise. Her parents tried to calm her, but the damage was done. The judge watched her with growing concern. When Sam finally sat, red-faced and breathing hard, the judge released a long, slow breath. "I have heard enough." The courtroom went silent. "This petition is denied." Sam gasped. Her mother whispered a plea. Her father looked stunned. The judge continued, "There is no evidence of impairment. In fact, the evidence overwhelmingly supports the opposite. It appears to the court that this petition was not filed out of genuine concern, but rather out of personal and financial motivation. This court will not be used as a tool for such purposes." I closed my eyes briefly, not in relief, in gratitude. When the hearing adjourned, people began filing out. Sam rushed toward Caleb, but he stepped back. Her father glared at me as if I had stolen something from him, though all I had done was defend what was already mine. Sam's voice wavered. "Caleb, please, we can fix this. I still love you. I was only doing what I thought was right for us." He looked at her so sadly it almost hurt to see. "You were never doing what was right for us, just what was right for you." She reached for him, but he turned away and walked toward me. Outside the courthouse, the air felt lighter. Sunlight fell across the steps. People moved around us. But for a moment, everything felt still. Caleb let out a long breath. "It is over, Mom." "Not everything," I said softly. But the part they tried to steal from us is done, and they will not get another chance. We drove home quietly, each lost in our thoughts. When we reached the ranch, the sun was low and golden across the fields. I stepped out of the truck and looked at the land, my father's land, the place where my husband and I raised our son, the place where I had fought and won without losing myself. Caleb came to stand beside me. What now? Now, I said, we heal, you rebuild your life, and I keep living mine. No one will take this place from us again. He nodded and slipped an arm around my shoulders. We stood that way for a long time, watching the sky shift colors. Later that night, after the lights were off and the house quiet, I sat on the porch steps and felt the peace settle deep in my bones. It was not the peace of having avoided a storm. It was the peace of having walked through it and come out whole. If you have lived long enough, you know that life brings storms you never expected. Sometimes it tests your strength in ways you never imagined. But if this story speaks to you, if it reminds you of something you have lived or something you fear you might face, stay with us. Share your thoughts. Share your story. And join me again for more stories of courage, wisdom, and the kind of resilience only life can teach.